Even among elite professionals who make a living fighting inside the UFC, there is one name that triggers a different reaction. Not hype, not trash talk, something closer to genuine unease. Islam Makhachev isn't just respected, he's avoided, whispered about, joked about in interviews as the opponent nobody wants to draw on a bad night. Fighters laugh and say they've had nightmares about facing him, but beneath the humor is something real. Since becoming UFC lightweight champion in 2022 and later proving himself across divisions, Makhachev has built a reputation that goes far beyond wins and belts. The fear started long before gold was wrapped around his waist. It began when experienced contenders stepped into the octagon, confident, vocal, and dismissive. Only felt. What makes him different isn't just strength or wrestling or even submissions. It's the way fights with him feel inevitable, like being pulled into deep water where every movement only makes things worse. Fighters talk about his pressure, his timing, and a grip that feels almost unreal, but those words don't fully explain it. The real fear comes from knowing that even if you prepare perfectly, even if you believe in yourself, once Islam Makhachev gets his hands on you, the fight stops being yours. So why do confident contenders keep underestimating him? Why does trash talk vanish the moment the cage door closes? And how did one fighter become the closest thing the UFC has to a final boss? Someone who doesn't just beat opponents, but changes how the entire division thinks about fighting him. To understand that fear, you have to look at the men who talked the loudest, right before they learned the truth. The first real warning sign didn't come from a title fight or a champion. It came from confidence that bordered on defiance. In 2021, top lightweight contender Dan Hooker was booked to face Islam Makhachev at UFC 267, and he wasn't buying into the growing mystique at all. While fans and analysts were already calling Islam a nightmare matchup, Hooker spoke like a man who had seen it all. He dismissed the idea of invincibility, saying every fighter bleeds, every fighter gets tired, and that Makhachev was, to him, just another body standing in front of him. Hooker didn't frame the fight as a chess match or a technical challenge. He framed it as a test of will, openly declaring that he was willing to give everything inside the octagon if that's what it took to stop the hype. But that confidence ran headfirst into a reality few fighters are prepared for. From the opening moments of the fight, it became clear that Islam wasn't there to trade ego for ego. He closed distance with calm precision, forced clinches without rushing, and once the fight hit the ground, the energy in the cage shifted instantly. Hooker wasn't overwhelmed by chaos or surprise. He was overwhelmed by control. Every attempt to create space was smothered. Every escape shut down before it fully began. The fear didn't come from being hurt, it came from realizing that none of his usual tools were working. Islam moved like someone who knew exactly where the fight was going before it ever arrived there. The submission came quickly, and when it was over, Hooker's words from before the fight felt like they belonged to a different person. That night didn't just add another win to Islam Makhachev's record, it sent a message through the division. Confidence alone wasn't enough. Experience wasn't enough. And if a proven contender like Dan Hooker could be dismantled so cleanly, then everyone else had to ask themselves an uncomfortable question. If this was Islam before a title, what would he look like once the belt was within reach? If Dan Hooker represented confidence meeting reality, then Bobby King Green represented something far more dangerous: dismissal. When Green was booked to face Islam Makhachev in 2022, he didn't just say he wasn't afraid, he openly mocked Islam's style. He called it boring, said nobody cared, claimed people fell asleep watching his fights, and positioned himself as the antidote to what he framed as an unentertaining grappler. Green's attitude stood out because it wasn't rooted in hatred or rivalry. It was rooted in disbelief. He genuinely seemed to think Islam's success was overrated, a product of optics rather than substance. But when the cage door closed, that disbelief turned into something fighters rarely admit to feeling: helplessness. The fight began on the feet, just long enough to confirm Green's confidence. But it didn't take long for Islam to do what he always does: close distance with patience, secure the clinch, and quietly take control. Once the fight hit the mat, the tone changed instantly. This wasn't chaos or panic, it was methodical pressure. Islam advanced position by position, never rushing, never overcommitting, forcing Green to carry his weight while stripping away every escape route. What made it frightening wasn't how fast it ended, but how inevitable it felt. When the referee stepped in to stop the fight in the first round, Green didn't look angry, he looked stunned. In the moments after, his initial reaction was pure awe. He spoke about Islam's strength, his patience, and how once Islam settled into mount, it felt impossible to move. Green admitted he had never felt someone that strong, someone who could hold him down with such quiet control. But as time passed, that awe began to morph into something else. After reflecting on the loss, Green publicly suggested that Islam's strength felt inhuman, implying that it couldn't be natural, and pointing toward performance-enhancing drugs as the explanation. Whether said out of frustration or self-preservation, that accusation revealed something important about the fear Islam creates. When fighters can't explain why their skills failed, some look for answers outside the cage. It's easier to believe in unfair advantages than to accept that someone might simply be operating on a different level. Islam never responded emotionally to the claims. He didn't need to. The results spoke louder than speculation. By that point, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Fighters went in confident, sometimes cocky, and came out searching for reasons. With 10 straight wins and another contender dismantled, the conversation around Islam began to shift. He wasn't just dangerous, he was unsolvable. And when someone reaches that point, fear stops being about pain or punishment. It becomes about the realization that even your best version might not be enough, especially with a title opportunity looming just ahead. When Islam Makhachev finally stepped into his first title fight, the fear surrounding him stopped being theoretical and became something measurable. At UFC 280, he faced Charles Oliveira, a champion many believed was uniquely built to survive Islam's greatest strength. Oliveira wasn't just another contender. He was riding an 11-fight win streak, held the record for the most submissions in UFC history, and had just finished elite names like Michael Chandler, Dustin Poirier, and Justin Gaethje. If anyone in the lightweight division was supposed to be immune to Islam's grappling pressure, it was him. Oliveira's confidence reflected that belief. He spoke openly about his ground game, about welcoming scrambles, about how dangerous he was even off his back. Fans leaned into that narrative, seeing this matchup as the ultimate test, the most suffocating control artist versus the most lethal submission hunter the division had ever seen. But Islam never framed the fight as a question mark. Long before the cage door closed, he spoke with calm certainty, saying he would take Oliveira down very fast, dismissing the idea that Charles's submission record changed anything. That confidence wasn't arrogance, it was familiarity. From the opening bell, Islam controlled the pace, outstruck Oliveira on the feet, and then brought the fight exactly where everyone expected it to be dangerous. What followed shocked the division. Oliveira's guard didn't create chaos. His submissions didn't force hesitation. Islam passed, settled, and applied pressure as if he were drilling in the gym, not fighting the most accomplished grappler in UFC history. When the arm triangle choke was locked in and Oliveira tapped, the arena fell silent for a split second. In that moment, fear transformed into proof. This wasn't just dominance over a challenger, it was dominance over the very idea that someone could out-grapple him. Fighters watching backstage weren't thinking about Oliveira's mistakes. They were thinking about what weapons were left. If the man with the most submissions couldn't threaten him, who could? That submission did more than win a belt, it rewrote the hierarchy of the lightweight division. Islam wasn't just champion now, he was the champion you couldn't game plan around. Styles didn't clash with him, they disappeared. Immediately after claiming the title, Islam did something that amplified the fear even further. Instead of calling out an easy first defense, he looked straight at Alexander Volkanovski, the featherweight champion and #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, and invited him into his domain. The message was unmistakable. Islam wasn't interested in protecting his belt. He was interested in proving that the fear surrounding him wasn't limited to one weight class or one type of opponent. By dismantling Oliveira so cleanly, and then immediately welcoming an all-time great challenger, Islam sent a signal through the UFC. The danger wasn't just that he could beat you. It was that he seemed eager to show just how little your strengths mattered. And as the division processed that reality, one question began to dominate every conversation. If Islam could neutralize the scariest grappler and confidently invite the pound-for-pound king into his world, how close was anyone to actually stopping him? When Alexander Volkanovski accepted the challenge, the narrative shifted from fear to curiosity. If anyone embodied adaptability, intelligence, and championship composure, it was the featherweight champion who had dominated his division for years and entered the fight as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. The matchup, booked for UFC 284, was framed as the ultimate test of whether elite movement, striking IQ, and preparation could finally disrupt Islam Makhachev's system. Volkanovski didn't talk like a man chasing a miracle. He spoke like a technician confident he could solve the puzzle. Inside the cage, that confidence translated into moments few had managed against Islam. Volkanovski defended takedowns, scrambled back to his feet, and forced extended striking exchanges, pushing the champion into deeper waters than anyone before him. Yet even as the fight grew competitive, the fear element never fully disappeared. Islam remained calm, never panicked, never chased finishes, banking rounds with control, timing, and positional awareness. When the decision was read and Makhachev won by unanimous decision, the debate exploded. Some saw proof that Islam was human. Others saw something more unsettling. Even on his toughest night, against the best possible style matchup, he still found a way to win. That perception mattered more than the scorecards. The fear evolved. It was no longer, can anyone survive him? But can anyone beat him without being perfect for 5 rounds? Volkanovski believed the answer was yes, and pushed for a rematch. But timing changed everything. When Charles Oliveira withdrew just 11 days before UFC 294, Volkanovski stepped in on short notice. A decision rooted in championship mentality but haunted by risk. This time, the fight didn't become a chess match. It became a lesson. From the opening exchange, Islam moved with intention, reading Volkanovski's rhythm and closing space with precision. Then it happened, a perfectly timed head kick, delivered with surgical calm, ending the fight in just 3 minutes. The result sent a shockwave through the sport. The man who had come closest to solving Islam was stopped decisively, and the reason wasn't mystery, it was preparation. Volkanovski admitted afterward that taking Islam Makhachev on short notice was a mistake, a quiet acknowledgement of something fighters were beginning to accept. You don't get second chances with Islam. You don't see how it goes. You either arrive fully prepared or you pay immediately. That knockout didn't erase the competitiveness of the first fight. It amplified the fear surrounding the rematch. Islam had shown 2 faces: the methodical champion who wins close battles, and the ruthless finisher who punishes even slight miscalculations. From that moment on, the division understood something crucial. The danger wasn't just Islam's grappling, or his striking, or his composure. It was his adaptability. Give him time, and he will drown you slowly. Take a shortcut, and he will end you instantly. And as fighters absorbed that reality, the fear surrounding Islam Makhachev stopped being abstract. It became a rule. There is no safe version of fighting him. By the time Islam Makhachev moved on from Alexander Volkanovski, fear around him had fully matured into something deeper than intimidation. It became expectation. Fighters no longer wondered if he would impose his game, only when. That reality followed him into his next major test against Dustin Poirier, a man widely regarded as one of the most durable, experienced, and dangerous strikers in the sport. Poirier wasn't dismissive, and he wasn't reckless. He spoke with confidence, but also with respect, acknowledging Islam's status while insisting that one clean shot could change everything. For many fans, this felt like the classic striker versus grappler narrative, the kind of matchup where chaos might finally disrupt control. Inside the octagon, that chaos never fully arrived. Poirier's takedown defense held up better than most expected, forcing Islam to spend extended stretches striking with a seasoned boxer who had shared the cage with legends. Yet even there, the fear factor remained. Islam didn't rush. He didn't abandon his identity. He adapted. He exchanged calmly, landed clean shots of his own, and waited. As the fight wore on, the pressure quietly returned. In the 5th round, One moment was all it took. Islam caught Poirier's leg, rotated his body with precision, and locked in a Darce choke, forcing the tap and ending the fight on his terms. Afterward, Poirier compared him directly to Khabib Nurmagomedov, noting the same unsettling rhythm, the same awkward movement, the same feeling of never quite being able to land cleanly. That comparison mattered. It told the division that Islam wasn't living in Khabib's shadow, he was continuing the lineage, refining it, and expanding it. With most elite lightweights now neutralized, the question shifted from challengers to ceilings. When top contender Arman Tsarukyan withdrew due to injury and Renato Moicano stepped in on just 24 hours' notice, the result felt pre-written. Islam imposed his will immediately, dragging the fight to the mat and securing another Darce choke in the first round, reinforcing a brutal lesson. Short notice against Islam isn't brave, it's catastrophic. At that point, there was little left for him to prove at lightweight, so he made the move that transformed fear into legacy, vacating the title and stepping up to welterweight. When Jack Della Maddalena claimed the belt, he promised to expose Islam as a lightweight out of place. What followed at Madison Square Garden shattered that belief. Over 5 rounds, Islam controlled the fight with relentless pressure, mixing takedowns, top control, and sharp striking, finishing with over 19 minutes of control time and a 50-45 unanimous decision. The numbers told a story no trash talk could erase. Islam Makhachev became a 2-division UFC champion, tied the record for 16 consecutive UFC wins, and entered discussions reserved for the greatest fighters in history. At that moment, the fear surrounding him reached its final form. It was no longer about style matchups or preparation windows. It was about the understanding that Islam doesn't just beat opponents, he systematically removes hope. And as the UFC landscape looks ahead, one question now looms larger than any belt or ranking. If Islam Makhachev can dominate 2 divisions with this level of control, composure, and inevitability, who if anyone has the tools to make him doubt for even a second? By the end of this story, it becomes clear why the fear surrounding Islam Makhachev feels different from the usual pre-fight nerves that define elite MMA. Fighters aren't scared because he talks louder, looks bigger, or carries himself with intimidation. They're scared because once the cage door closes, the fight begins to feel unavoidable. Time, space, and options disappear. What makes Islam terrifying isn't chaos, it's structure. Every exchange pushes opponents closer to a place they don't want to be, and the more disciplined they are, the longer they're forced to experience it. From Dan Hooker's early confidence, to Bobby Green's disbelief, to Charles Oliveira's collapse, to Alexander Volkanovski's hard lesson about preparation, and finally to Dustin Poirier and a second championship at welterweight, the pattern never changes. Different styles, different personalities, same ending. Islam doesn't rely on miracles or moments of luck. He relies on systems that work under pressure. That's why trash talk fades when his name comes up, why fighters speak carefully, and why short notice opportunities against him feel less like bravery and more like desperation. He doesn't just beat contenders, he rewrites how divisions think about risk. In a sport built on confidence, that's the most unsettling advantage of all. So when people ask why UFC fighters seem genuinely uneasy around Islam Makhachev, the answer isn't complicated. It's because deep down, they understand something fans are only starting to grasp. Fighting Islam isn't about surviving a round or winning a moment. It's about escaping a process that very few have ever found a way out of. And until someone proves otherwise, the fear isn't hype, it's recognition.